Hi everyone, this is 3.3 of my dysfunctional family system used mental health, judicial, and religious institutions against me. Okay, so in part one, I unpacked mental health institutions. There is an underlying reason why my mother had me committed. If you want to know that reason, my book, I'll Love You Forever, will be released later this year in 2026. In part two, I unpacked judicial systems, my response to numb pain was a childhood conditioned response. My parents were equally neglectful, if not more so, to my sister and myself. My mother's alcoholism lasted throughout 13 years of my life, and my father's alcoholism lasted throughout 16 years of my life. However, anytime my mother took a trip to upstate New York alone to visit her family, you better bet she was drinking. So technically, she was never in recovery. While I was in upstate New York with my mother one year, I had driven up, she flew up. I met with her at an uncle's house, which is when she asked if I wanted to go have a drink. I questioned her as to whether she was capable of doing that, seeing as to how she had been in recovery. While we were at the bar, my mother paid for every one of our drinks. We were both highly intoxicated. After returning back to where we were staying later that evening, she challenged me, and when I stood up to walk away, she grabbed my arm, sinking her fingertips into my arm and leaving bruises on my arm. The very next day, she flew back home and informed the pastor of our church and my father and anybody else who would listen to her that I was the one who was up there drinking. This was so she could continue her narrative of me to others. On another occasion, and I have very many of these, my sister was not doing well and my nieces were extremely young. So I offered to bring my nieces to church with me. This, again, is the same church that later on I was sexually assaulted at, and where also my parents attended. I sat close to the front, and while I was there at the congregation with my nieces, they were doing what toddlers do. They were making noises. This, I guess, embarrassed my mother because she approached the front of the church and decided to tell me that she was bringing my nieces back to my sister. And I didn't want my mother to do that, but she chose to do it anyway. Next thing I know, after church, I'm receiving a phone call from my sister who is cussing me out. My sister was not a believer at the time, and again, she was not doing well. And she was cussing me out because apparently my mother told her that I was complaining about the children making noises in the front of the church, and I was not. It was my mother who was doing so. So later that evening, I called a family meeting between my mother and my sister and myself. I showed up at my mother's house where my sister was staying, and together we sat down to discuss the problem. And my mother decided to act like she didn't know. Oh, I didn't know. And this is the typical thing that happens to my mother when she's been caught in something. She does this thing where she acts like she's clueless and, oh, I didn't know. And she's recently done that again. At the point back in August of 2025 where the Epstein files were about to be released, and I am a sexual assault survivor. I know many women who are sexual assault survivors, and I'm telling you, every sexual assault survivor around the world was watching this and hopeful that these women would have their day in court and receive justice, because many of us did not. I began sharing my story because I am very familiar with what it feels like to be a victim who is not believed, and a victim who does not receive justice. So I was sharing my story in public venue on my personal Facebook page, and I received a text message from my mother asking me to stop sharing what I was sharing on my Facebook page because it was hurting her and my father. Can you imagine that? Not, I'm sorry that this is how you felt. I'm sorry that this hurt you so much. It was, please stop sharing that because it's hurting your father and I. I then had an uncle and an aunt reach out to me to tell me that they were unaware of what had occurred and that they were very sorry that it happened. His uncle happens to be my mother's favorite brother. So how he was not aware of this is beyond me. So the next time we decided to visit with my mother and father, which we did at least once a month, my mother brought up the fact that I had been talking about this online, and she proceeds to tell me, I didn't know. And I can only assume that that's what she's telling everybody else. Her father and I were not aware, but they were. They were. So when my mother sent me the text message about it hurting, what I was saying online, hurting my father and my mother, she added that I had become very bitter, angry, and hateful, and that it was getting worse. And so I replied to that statement by saying to her that I bet if she sat long enough that she could think about someone whom she also hated, and that I had forever felt like that person was me, because she has never accepted me in any attempts that I have made to receive her approval and love. The next day, she posted a video from a senior page that said, if your child says one of these 7 things, walk away from them. And one of the 7 things that was listed was, if your child ever says to you that they feel like they were never loved by you, walk away. I called my dad's contact number to confront both him and my mother about the fact that my mother had posted this, because my mother has forever triangulated. She does things in secret so that she can quickly remove that she's done it, and make, when you respond to her in it, it makes you look like you're crazy, and it makes you look like it makes her look like she's the victim. It makes you look like you're crazy because you're saying something that she's saying is untrue. Oh, I didn't know that she's saying is untrue. But, it is true, and other people have witnessed that it's true, and yet she portrays herself as the victim in the aftermath, as she is now doing. So once again, I have gone no contact with my parents, and my sister has been handed the crown. She has become the the flying monkey, who is now spreading disinformation about me amongst my family. I want to make this clear. I have spent the last 51 years of my life attempting to have family communication, to talk about these things with my family. I was always informed that either these things didn't happen, or it's, what the most famous thing my mother would say is, things are not always what you perceive. You might have seen it this way, but that's not the way that it was. This is how it's just always, you're always made to feel like you are batshit crazy. But all of this are the characteristics of a narcissistic family system.